Alright, so this is a suggestion via a donation. The name of the video is, are hippos OP? Yes. Absolutely. I didn't even know that was a question. But alright. Let's check it out.
This episode is sponsored by Dashlane.
Okay.
Africa, the game's hardcore server. On top of the potentially lethal heat and disease debuffs, many of the most powerful builds in the game are playable only on the Africa server. Everyone knows the big names. Elephants are the biggest, cheetahs are the fastest, cobras are the most venomous, etc. However, one of the builds that frequently gets overlooked is the hippopotamus.
Bro, who's overlooking a hippo? That may be a stretch.
Even though none of their stats are the best in a single category, there are things that they do better than anything else. So today I'm going to give an overview of the hippopotamus's stats and abilities, talk about its good and bad matchups, and where I'd rate it in the overall tier list.
Okay.
I've already done one video that sort of touches on all these things, but since it was one of the first videos I ever made, it's pretty lacking in quality. So hopefully this guide will do a better job doing the topic justice. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. Hippos are the premier tank build of the African aquatic meta. Their success comes from a combination of phenomenal stats and from speccing into abilities that allow for some pretty ingenious exploitation of the game's water physics, which I'll get into in a bit. But first, their stats. So you can probably notice that the Hippo stats are...
Let's go and look at it. I could definitely tell you that these are probably higher than I thought they were going to be. I expected a somewhat decent stealth stat because it spends a lot of time in the water, has the ability to kind of go underwater. It's also heavy enough to kind of walk normally underneath the water, so I expected that to be pretty high. But it's not as high as I thought it was going to be. But either way, I definitely saw this coming in terms of their health pool because they weigh a lot. Defense, because they have super thick skin. I think it penetrates. I think. I think like bites and scratches are not going to really do anything, mainly because their skin is so thick, right? So I expected, honestly, more defense, but so that tells me that there are other animals in that area that have probably higher defense against the hippo's tusks, right? Intelligent, I'm not surprised. I don't think they're probably like the smartest things out there. They're making it, right? And power, I thought it was going to be a lot more than that. But either way, these are extremely decent stats for any animal, and of course, it would have to be an animal that's based in the African server, guys, no doubt. Let's get it.
In a word, phenomenal. They have one of the highest HP levels of any land build, second only to the elephant. Normally, builds with one unusually high base stat tend to have major shortcomings in other areas.
This one doesn't
but the Hippo simply doesn't.
Right.
While its intelligence is only average, all the rest of their stats far outclass most other African builds. They have great damage, high defense, and even have great stealth for a build in such a high weight class. But perhaps the most surprising is their mobility level, which relates to how their abilities let them engage in physics engine exploits like I mentioned earlier.
Like swimming in the ocean.
So in addition to having relatively high run speed on land, Hippos...
I thought it couldn't float, though. If it can't float, how is it swimming like that in the ocean?
Are also unbelievably mobile in the water.
Fast.
Now, normally when designing your character to be fast in the water, you spec into traits like, water mobility. Things like a streamlined body, fins, flukes, webbed feet, all these things strictly buff water speed, and usually are the go-to for players trying to take their character to new depths in the aquatic meta.
Right.
The Hippo player base decided to do exactly none of that, instead dumping most of their evolution points into pure bulk and muscle. As a result, hippos are so dense that, unlike most animals, they do not float. This lets them be one of the only builds that can actually use the run movement option underwater with any success.
Yeah, but how fast are they actually, though? Do we have the ability to run from a hippo? And, get away?
So yeah, hippos, despite not actually being able to swim, have one of the best aquatic movement options in the game, and they didn't even have to spend any evolution points on aquatic mobility to do so. So, hippos have 4 signature abilities, the first being their water dash ability that I just explained. Their second ability is their 2-inch thick skin. This ability is the reason behind their high defense level, and it grants them some of the best resistances in the game.
So it sounds like they actually have no predators.
Particularly to the common threats in the African server. It grants them near total immunity to slash and bite type damage, since claws and teeth simply are too short to pierce their skin. This lets them shrug off the vast majority of standard attacks in the African meta, and is also crucial for letting them survive attacks even from groups of enemies, which is normally the answer to defeating a high HP target.
It doesn't even matter.
Defending from physical attacks is important, but it's just as critical to make sure your elemental resistances are adequate too. Because hippos have spec'd into the hairless trait in order to minimize mobility debuffs in the water, they're highly vulnerable to solar damage. In order to mitigate this issue,
Like
hippos
Crocs.
have spec'd into sweat that grants them UV resistance and,
Wait, they sweat too? So now we have 3. Humans, horses, and hippos. Interesting.
as an added bonus, grants them resistance
Okay, yeah, so we're probably not going to get away. We could run, but I don't know if their sweat has anything to do with like them like overusing their stamina. If that makes any sense. Like once their stamina starts running low, do they sweat, or is it just exclusively based off of them being out of the water and in the sun? Because if it's just that, then we could probably run, maybe, depending on the speed. Just hopefully they're not at like, low 20s. I think the average person probably has the ability to run at top speed, maybe like 15, 17, maybe. Then you have like the superhumans who can do like 32, right? So yeah, hopefully, no, it's probably going to catch us. Never mind.
to infection, another hugely beneficial trait to have when you spend most of your time in unclean water, potentially with open wounds. The only downside is that while active, it gives the hippo players a reddish tint, temporarily lowering their stealth level. Their last special trait is their tusks. Hippos haven't spec'd into carnivory or even omnivory. They're strictly herbivorous and can't gain any XP from meat. However, regardless of this fact, they have one of the most damaging bites in the game.
That video is
On top
crazy.
of the sheer force of the bite itself, which is around a ton by the way, their tusks deal massive damage to anything they puncture. But on top of the
Baby
hippo's
though,
damage
guys?
potential,
Baby.
their tusks offer another important benefit: intimidation. So the most effective intimidation techniques are the ones that can be quickly switched on and off. A coral snake's colors are always bright, and a spider is always creepy, but hippos aren't always terrifying.
Always.
In fact, most of the time they appear non-threatening, yet in an instant they can
Bro, they always look threatening. I look at it, and I get it. It's this big, gigantic animal. You think that it's cute. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. Apparently, it'll absolutely obliterate you. Just won't eat you. Imagine, you just got obliterated by a hippo, and the hippo's not even gonna eat you, bro. That's disrespectful to the meat.
crank up the intimidation to 100 just by opening their mouths. A hippo player with intimidation active is one of the most intimidating things in the entire game, easily being able to scare off even some of the bulkiest builds like rhinos. Okay, so for matchups, hippos sport one of the most comfortable matchup spreads
rhino
possible.
versus a hippo, how would that
Because
work?
they're highly resistant to bite and slash attacks. Most of the relevant predator
Guys, I think the rhino would probably be super damaging to a hippo. Only for one reason, though: the horn. Because, like, what else has the ability to penetrate armor generally? Like, I mean, if we're talking about, like, coming from, like, a firearm world, obviously you're going to probably stop. Like, you're not going to go in an area where there's hippo and carry a 22 or something. You understand what I'm saying here? You're probably going to bring some, like, 30-30 or, like, 223, 556, 458 SOCOM. You get what I'm saying here, guys? You're going to bring something that can penetrate some armor. Because I can tell you right now, the rhino's horn probably has the ability to do that. Probably.
matchups, such as crocodiles, lions,
You need
hyenas,
puncture-
and painted dogs, are
puncture
highly
damage.
favorable for the hippo. On top of this, the hippo's own attacks can one-shot any of those predators. As for bad matchups, any builds that focus on stab-type weaponry can definitely give a hippo
Okay,
a hard
yeah,
time.
the elephant also
In
makes sense,
particular, elephants and rhinos both have long enough horns or tusks to pierce the hippo's thick skin and deal critical damage to a hippo foolish enough to challenge them. Fortunately, the rhino's low intelligence makes it highly susceptible to intimidate abilities, so that matchup is by no means unwinnable. Elephants, though, they'll walk straight through a group of hippo players, knowing none of them will challenge it. Also, ironically, one of the worst matchups for a
Elephants
hippo
are
is another hippo, since a hippo's
mean, it
tusks
looks like.
do have the potential to pierce their defenses. The last important matchup to discuss for them is how they fare against humans, and in this regard, they've got one of the best records of all. Obviously, they still lose to the highly advanced equipment that humans have recently unlocked, but aside from that, humans don't have any way to combat them. As a result, hippos
But
have the
how about
highest
Jack Black?
KD ratio versus humans in the entire game. Even special high-level mounts like boats and trucks can be taken down by a hippo. So where do hippos belong on the tier list?
This man said high-level mounts.
Well, considering how they're basically unstoppable tanks that manage to spec into an excellent semi-aquatic playstyle without sacrificing any land-based abilities to do so, it's tough to argue that they're anything but S tier. They easily control any rivers or lakes that they're in, being even more dominant than crocodiles. In fact, while currently the vast majority of the hippo...
I'm gonna be honest, I don't mind the S tier ranking for hippos. I don't think that they're extremely intelligent at all, but I do think that they're unstoppable, you know.
Player bases in the African server.
Period.
A few of them have recently broken into the South American meta. Now, hippos have one of the lower spawn rates in the game, so it'll be a while before we can really assess their viability in servers outside of Africa, but I would bet that eventually hippos will be one of the most dominant builds in South
Escobar brought them.
America too, especially since they have great matchups against the top tiers there too, like the Cayman and the Jaguar. The Piranha player base might give them a hard time though, so we'll have to wait and see. Their thick hide offers a lot of protection, but with hundreds of bites chipping it away, even the hippo might struggle. Protecting your hit points is critical to survival in the current meta, but perhaps equally important is protecting your passwords, and that's...
All right. So now here's the thing. Starting this video, I kind of knew that hippos were OP. I didn't know that he was going to place him in S tier, but I understand fully, and I agree with his overall assessment of hippos being S tier. I don't know if rhinos I wouldn't put in there, but I do think that rhinos could easily demolish hippos. But apparently they just don't have the intelligence stat ranked up. They need to work on that. Maybe the next patch we'll get something solid from the rhinos, guys. But all right, listen, let me know in the comments of the next thing from him that I should be checking out, and I will get into that as soon as I possibly can. All right, and listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly.